Welcome to the VO2 Lounge, bulking on a budget. As usual, I was on Reddit the other day looking for some creative inspiration, and just sometimes where I go to just see what kind of questions do people actually have outside of the stuff maybe I get through email or WhatsApp or whatever. And I stumbled across this question. I'm 16 years old, 6'3", and I want to start bulking, but I need to buy my own food. How can I do that as cheap as possible? Now, if you're a runner or a cyclist, then this will feel a bit counterintuitive. You know, cyclists and runners are always on about trying to how do they get lighter. But for a rugby player, or more in this case, likely a gym bro, this is a real issue and something people genuinely start wondering about. On that note, let me know what your primary exercise modality is. Like what's your main sport? Is it running, cycling, rugby, football? Or given this episode, pumping iron at the Church of Iron, you know, going to the gym, self-improvement and all that. Now, comment on Spotify or join the WhatsApp community to share with me and others in the community as to what your main sport is and talk about this episode. All the links will be down below, and it's recently started, so I'm just looking to grow the community at the moment. So how many calories do you need? That's probably the important place to start. So when it comes to buying on a budget, depending how many calories you need, that's going to vastly kind of affect the kind of foods you need to eat, how much it's going to cost, so on and so forth. So let's sort of start by assigning a weight to this person. They haven't given one, so we're just going to guess. Let's assume that at 6'3", 189 centimeters, this person weighs, let's say, 80 kilos or 176 pounds, hence the desire for them to go on a bulk. A rough idea of how many calories you need can come from a calorie calculator. In this case, it suggests 2,996 calories per day. That's just a generic one off the internet. I've just put like active, assuming, you know, at that age you are still kind of active. Yes, you sit at a desk at school, but for the most part, you're at lunch, running about. You probably do some sports still. You got PE, or just for those non-UK listeners, just where you have a sports lesson where you go play football or go do athletics or whatever it is outside of after-school activities. And it's come to essentially 3,000 calories. So for the bulk, we're going to go for that 3,000 calories is maintenance. So for the bulk, we're going to go for a 10% surplus. You could go as high as 20%, but let's start with 10%. So 3,296 calories, 3,300 basically. You can just multiply your maintenance calories by 1.1 to get the 10% surplus. That's the easiest way of doing it if you don't know. If you stay tuned to the end of this episode, I'm going to give you my true opinion of going on a bulk, because if I'm honest, you might not actually need to go on one in the first place. So macronutrient breakdown, that's the next step here. And in all honesty, you can go through various AI tools, and they do give you kind of a half decent idea of what you're trying to achieve, but may not highlight the necessity of the bulk in the first place. So what about macros? Well, typical wisdom is to follow a ratio of 25, 50, 25 of protein, carbs, and fat as your total calories as a percentage. So 25% from protein, 50% from carbs, 25% from fats. But first, we need to discuss protein. If you're going to be trying to increase muscle mass, then you're going to need protein to help peak and facilitate muscle growth, or the building of new muscle, also known as like muscle protein synthesis. Now, lifting weights in itself does this, but protein is then essentially the building block for that. You also need energy and, you know, carbohydrates and fats to provide that energy as well as protein. But protein is going to be used to repair and build new muscle. So it's important to get that right. Typically, it is suggested when you go on the internet to aim for 1 gram per pound or 2 grams per kilogram. But in reality, a lot of the research shows this is the upper end. and really would be a muscular individual who's going on a caloric restriction. They're like cutting, or they're in a deficit. They're eating less calories than they need. They're trying to lose weight. And 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram. Really, aim for the 2 grams as the upper end, but try to just be somewhere in between there. Don't worry if you're at 1.7, 1.8, and try scramble to get that final 0.2. You're there. So for the 80 kilo individual, that's going to be between 120 and 160 grams of protein per day. Preferably split across the day, so you're not exceeding 50 grams approximately in a given meal to maximize not the digestion, as some people will say, or the utilization. It's the utilization here. Obviously, you'll digest the protein if you eat more in a given meal, but it's thought that the actual effective utilization for what you're consuming it for, aka building muscle and putting it to work and recovering, 50 grams maximum. And hitting about 25 or 30 in a given meal, that's also going to help trigger muscle protein synthesis and start ramping it up. Now, for your carbs, obviously these proteins are going to come with a given number of calories, and whether that's 23%, 25%, 26%, that's now your calories determined from protein. Now, depending how you're getting it, like if you're having an oily fish, then that meal may, be less efficient in its delivery of protein for its given calories. But we'll get onto that a bit later as to food selection. For your carbs, which you need to think as is your fuel for your workouts, and for your overall energy balance, look no further than rice, potatoes, pasta, bread. I know pasta and bread get this bad rep, but honestly, if you're going to the gym and doing weights, and in particular a bit of cardio, then it's probably not as much of a concern to you as an individual as someone who, say, is excessively consuming these foods on the sofa, at which point brown rice, it doesn't matter. You're still going to have a wacky glycemic profile, like blood sugar profile, and probably be overweight. So eat what you like, what's convenient. Probably rice, pasta, potatoes, potentially more cost effective than bread because you can buy them in such a bulk, and they store, in particular in the case of pasta and rice, store on the shelf for forever. Basically, they store for ages. You can buy them in ridiculously large bag sizes, like rice you can get in 15 kilo bags. But to be honest, bread can be pretty cheap in a quality product. Obviously, that's where it becomes a bit more so. Rice, generally easy to get decent quality, but bread can vary greatly in like the amount of preservatives and so on and so forth. Now, speaking of cardio, don't skip it during your bulk thinking that you're going to eradicate all your gains. There is an element of where you place it that it's thought to be more conducive of, like, aligned with building muscle by doing it before the workout rather than after the workout. But for the most part, if you're doing a quality aerobic session, like a quality low intensity workout or quality high intensity workout, then say zone 2, for example, as your low intensity, and VO2 max as your high intensity. Really, if you're going to the gym 3 times, 4 times a week, and you got 1 or 2 days spare to do some zone 2 work, it doesn't then necessarily need to be attached to the weight session, and that way you can have clear rest away from it. If you've got more time, then yes, potentially you could do an aerobic session in the morning and then strength session in the afternoon. That's something that works for you. If you like splitting out 2 days and then having a more days off, that's up to you to figure out. But it's important, especially if you're consuming probably a surplus of calories, a lot of sugars in the form of just carbohydrates. Your blood sugar management and metabolic flexibility, like your ability to manage glucose, manage fats, utilize them when necessary, have a very stable kind of energy level and prevent you from sort of treading towards that kind of insulin resistance level, it's very beneficial. It's going to allow for potentially improve your workouts. If you're just more aerobically strong, it means even though the weightlifting itself is anaerobic, the recovery is aerobic. So it will allow you to have better sessions, allow them to be longer, greater intensity. It is very important and something that people will overlook. Yes, if you're trying to peak for this bodybuilding competition and you're doing 6 days a week or something, then maybe you can only squeeze in a little bit, like 10 minutes, 20 minutes before a given session. That amounts to maybe an hour in the week, but it's still better than nothing. It's still an important part to consider in all of this. Why am I talking about this? Well, because part of the bulk on a budget is being effective about how you go about things, and this can somewhat feed into energy profiles and prevent snacking to some extent. But also it's getting the best bang for your buck here. So it's about the training as much as it is about the products you're buying. Now, cheap food for a bulk. This is really the crux of the question. When you go through the comments, that's what people are focusing on. They're not focusing on the training, focusing on the food, because I suppose on a budget, food, but arguably part of that budget is ensuring that you are, training adequately. But the food, let's get on to the food. Now, for food, you're going to be using to get the protein in. This is subject to where you live, but your essentials are going to be chicken breast or even thighs. If you're liking to go even cheaper, eggs. And if you want some fish in your diet, you can go for like canned tuna and canned salmon, mackerel even. And these generally will be more costly, dollar or pound per gram of protein, but it can be healthy to get in. Some people really like fish, they like to keep it in the diet, but fresh fish, definitely not very cost effective. And I know when I was younger and doing these kind of bulks myself, as a rugby player wanting to put some mass on, that at least for the UK, chicken breast or chicken thigh, definitely really cost effective. Eggs, you can, again, very cost effective. Then, as much as people may look at the one-off cost as being high with whey protein, it can be incredibly cost effective. It can be more cost effective than pretty much, like, for example, fish and these tinned fishes on a cost per serving basis versus for the total cost per grams of protein achieved. And protein powder with some, regular cow's milk with it can easily be a way of starting your day off with 40 or even 50 grams of protein. If you're someone who, your breakfast, you just like to have kind of, say, oats, which, yes, there's a bit of protein in here, but, it's within a plant product. So how bioavailable and how easy it is for the body to uptake this. And even then, maybe you're getting 10 grams. If you still like consuming those products, which is fine, perfectly fine, if you're trying to maximize protein intake and you're having a meal where you're not maximizing that ceiling and you're trying to hit 150, 200 grams, depending on your weight, then this is a really good way of upping that. Because at lunch and dinner, it's easier to have meat products in there or eggs or something like that. And yes, breakfast, you can have eggs, but maybe you only want 2 or 3. And so you're down a little bit of protein, you have a bit of milk with a bit of, which is going to have some additional calories, especially if it's full fat, for example, with some protein powder and, improve your overall ability to hit that protein goal. Essentially, buying these products in bulk is going to be your go-to way of keeping costs down. Essentially, rather than going to the shops 4 or 5 times a week, buy like 300 grams of chicken breast. We go once, you buy the 2 kilo pack, and rice, especially things like that stay on the shelf for a long time, rather than buying the 1 kilo bag, or even worse, the microwave pre-done bags. You buy the 10, 15 kilo bag. Tinned fish you could buy when it's on offer, it keeps on the shelf longer. Protein powders, if you buy, like, say, For example, my favorite is Optimum Nutrition. Not endorsed in any way, just really like the product. But they, from time to time, maybe say 4 times a year, have really good offers on where you can save substantially on the total cost of the product. And therefore, if you have the money in the bank to do it, you can buy, say, 8 months, even a year's worth in one go and keep the costs drastically down. Now, in the case of this individual who gave me this idea with this 16-year-old here, you likely don't have a job. If you do have a job, it probably doesn't pay that well. So fronting up the capital to do it may be a bit harder, but you can always, especially if it's something like this, it's not particularly wasteful. It's like self-improvement. So in theory, parents should be quite supportive of these kind of things. And if they have the money, you never know what your household situation is like. But if they do, then they're willing to front the money, and then you pay them back, and there you go. You've saved, even though you're having to buy it yourself. Now, if you find yourself short on calories, then adding snacks like peanuts and Greek yogurt can be add a substantial amount of fat to the diet that ups the calories, but also gets the protein in. And they tend to be quite cheap products. Greek yogurt you can usually get in 1 or even sometimes 2 kilo tubs. Depends again where you live. And peanuts, north of 1 kilo bags. Peanuts are really good from a calorie perspective, but it raises the point of, from 600 calories ish of peanuts, you'll be getting 25 grams of protein. So they're not a great source of directly that's going to get you to your protein goals. But say you are short 500 calories and short 20 grams of protein, then you could find something like that and go, oh, there you go. 600 calories, 20 grams of protein, job done. Greek yogurt, a bit less calorific, but again, can serve the same purpose of you go, oh, I'm short of calories, short a little bit of protein. I'll go to away from the meat products that tend to be leaner and tend to have less calorie content. And that's kind of how you're balancing it. When you know you're restricted on total calorie consumption, then using lean meats essentially is your way forward. If you've got a little bit more room, then things like chicken when it's got the skin on and thighs where it's a bit fattier, you can go that route. And then if you really need more calories and the protein, you're very close to the goal already, then you come to things like Greek yogurt, you come to things like beans, and you come to things like nuts in general. Specifically peanuts, because just in the UK at least they are a lot cheaper than other kinds of nuts that you can often buy. Now, it's worth noting, though, in all of this, that people will say, especially because of things like vegetarianism and veganism, that lentils, beans, those kind of things, legumes, are high in protein. And although, yes, 100 grams of raw, uncooked lentils is 25 grams of protein, but you're also looking at 63 grams of carbs. So overall, a much more calorie-heavy protein source that doesn't give you much flexibility. For example, if you're getting carbs and protein from one food source, it now means it's hard to go, okay, I want to drop my carbs but keep my protein high. Whereas if you two independent items, say like chicken, rice, it doesn't have to be plain chicken and rice, it could be some kind of broth or whatever, but if there's two specific items, if you are over your protein goal, then rather than 100 grams of chicken in a meal, it can be 75 or 50 grams. And if you want more carbs, or specifically if you've had a hard session, you've had a long day, you get to the end of the day and you're like, first thing in the morning, I'm training legs and I'm pretty fatigued. Well, then you have a bigger portion of carbs, protein stays the same. So you up your, say, rice content from 100 grams to, say, 150 or 200 grams. And there you go. That's one of the big things I think about optimizing these bolts, is being able to separate items very clearly. What is a food substance primarily giving you? Is it protein? Is it carbs? Is it fats? And go from there. And it's important to know that carbs, for example, 4 calories per gram, whereas fat, talking at 9. So over double the amount of calories per gram. So that's why things that are fat heavy like peanuts versus something that maybe is carb heavy, say like a lentil, the total calorie concentration could be a difference of, say, from 350, say, for 100 grams of lentils, and then you're talking 550, say, for 100 grams of peanuts, both offering 25 grams of protein, but one of them is offering up 63 grams of carbs versus the other that's probably in that kind of 50, 60 grams of fat, really. So that's what you have to be cautious of. But they're all very good, cost-effective ways of improving your overall bulk. Now, training for the bulk, which you're on a budget. So part of the budget is you don't want to have to go on a bulk for 50 weeks because you're under training and you're stretching this out. If you're going to do a bulk and you're making this decision that you want increased muscle growth or hypertrophy, your goal isn't necessarily strength, of course, but it's building muscle. How do you do this? Well, you need to focus on this training. You need to come in, when you're doing a bulk, you almost need to come into it going, okay, the 10-week roadmap in front of me in work or whatever it is looks very stable. And home life, say it's winter, you're not going out as much. It's dark days. If you're in the UK, very dark days, miserable weather. I'm just going to go to the gym more often. I'm going to go 3, 4, 5 times a week, right? It's a great time to have a bulk. You can go to the gym more often. It's less interrupted by other activities. You can even do weekend sessions because maybe your weekends aren't as crammed with social activities if you're more of an outdoors person. So you need to focus on this training to consolidate and prevent you from having this long, drawn-out, unnecessary bulk. But what does that mean? It means you're training with some good intensity here. You should always be doing it. But if you're going on a bulk, you need to be even more purposeful with this. I'll let you figure out the best program for your training to fit your schedule, whether it's 2-a-days, whether it's 3 days a week, 4 days a week, whether it's a push-pull, leg split, so on and so forth. All of these work. Just figure out what works for you. But you're going to be targeting probably 10 plus sets per body part. You're looking at reps in the range of 10 to 15. Rest periods, crucial here, of course, like the others. If you're going with a friend, make sure you're timing these rest periods. And if you're going on your own, you can go on your phone, but make sure you're timing. What I kind of like to do is if I do have something that I'm planning on looking at while I'm in the gym, because it's just a good use of my time, say, for example, or I'm a bit distracted and I just need to look at some things. My watch, for example, does the time, and then my phone has my music but I'm browsing on, and that way I've still got a clear focus on, okay, it's been a minute, only got 30 seconds till the next set, so finish up what you're doing on your phone and get ready. You want to make sure that there is, if there wasn't already before, that there is a focus here. And if there was a focus before, that is even amped up even further in trying to maximize each session. Because also, if you're in this energy surplus, you should be feeling pretty good. Yes, maybe you could feel a bit bloated, but at times, if you're going on a mega bulk, but if you're only on 10% surplus, you should just always be feeling pretty kind of good. And if your carbs are high and you're getting those in, then you should feel very energized for these workouts. And this is why I'd also sort of advocate for trying to minimize the amount of calories you're getting through fat and getting some, a good amount of carbs in, because especially if you're doing this cardio work and you're able to store more muscle glycogen, like more energy fuel in your muscles, then a little bit of a influx of carbohydrates the night before or the day before, just to keep things ticking over, rather than when you're maybe in a deficit or sort of toeing the line, like just staying neutral. You may have these peaks and troughs and feel flat some of the time, but during a bulk you should feel pretty good. But what's my opinion on bulking? Because I did mention this. I did say that I would share at the end of this what my opinion was on bulking. And my opinion is, do you really need a bulk? In the case of this person, at 16 years old, their training age is definitely under 10 years. How often do you lift is the question. How optimized is your plan? Are you achieving the modern day lifting first principles? before you consider a bulk. Like, are you using progressive overload, periodization? Are you stretching the muscle, maximizing the work that it's doing and the stimulus going to it to grow? What's your body fat percentage, more importantly, to some extent? Because the reason I mention these things, one of the reasons being the fact that often, at least, okay, anecdotally, but also from experience with other people, most people who are going to the gym and then going on a bulk aren't doing it for a given sport. In the instance I went on a bulk, it was because at the time, 90 kilos, playing in the second row, a position in rugby where people are generally larger. At like 90 kilos, let's say, I was pretty light. So I wanted to up my mass to be more of a destructive force on the playing field. And so that meant rising to, over the course of about 2 years, 106, 107 kilos. Strength came with it, but that was the overall focus. There was a reason for the bulk. Whereas if it's just to put on mass for the aesthetic reasoning or for some kind of body composition shift, or to go through a plateau, which often is what I hear people saying, well, I've hit a plateau. They've been lifting maybe for 2 years on and off, 3 years maybe at a push, and is the plateau because you've hit your physiological limit? Highly unlikely. It's more likely you've hit your training stimulus limit. Either frequency isn't high enough, quality of movements isn't high enough, rest periods are too long, volume's too low, all these kind of things that, rather than just using the bulk, which will inevitably result in likely some strength gains, they could simply, especially if you've got slightly higher body fat percentage, say you even like 20 or 25%, we're not talking like 40% here, you can quite easily, I've got an episode in the past about body recomposition and how you can simply, by, lifting weights, working out a bit harder, staying on maintenance calories, you can see a shift in not much weight potentially, but an increased muscle mass, a better looking physique overall, and achieve the goal without having to go through this bulk where you put on inevitably this fat mass because you haven't managed it too well, you haven't stepped on the scales frequently enough to see how the weight's going on, you've seen the strength gain, so assume it's all muscle, and then have to go through a cut which is equally horrible and, well, arguably worse, to then actually realize the physique. So potentially, if you've been doing all these things right and you've hit somewhat of a plateau, almost look at it as about like you're like a boxer or a power lifter and you've got a weight category. Figure out how you can put on more muscle or more strength within that weight category, rather than necessarily saying, I need to progress to the next weight category. Obviously, for individuals who are really, let's say, undernourished, then maybe it's beneficial. But I think more often than not, you've probably got an individual who simply doesn't actually need this bulk, and therefore worrying about how to do a bulk on a budget isn't a problem. It should be, how do I maximize overall physique at my current weight? So I think that's probably the better question. Now, it's obviously not at the same level, and I'm not comparing the two, but it's a bit like people jumping to steroid use to increase their physique when they've been lifting for 2-3 years, haven't maximized their training, and simply maybe see someone who has been training for 10-15 years, has hit this almost physiological limit, and then it's gone super physiological, like they've gone over and above their physiology by injecting some kind of external aid. But a bulk can be the similar sort of way. They look at someone who has progressed, has achieved like solid 5-10 years of training, and then has hit this plateau within their current physique, or needs. The thing is, you have to look at it as, it's like, how big a stimulus do you need? You may just need a stimulus within your current realms of calorie intake, but some individuals may need a greater push in potentially some of it just pure energy levels, so through the caloric intake, to actually encourage more and more muscle growth. And if it's an energy thing, then just take some kind of carbohydrate with you into the gym. Maybe it's just sugar in a bottle of water, maybe it's a little energy gel, an energy bar, something like that, just to give you a little boost when you're in there, when you start to feel a bit flatter, and see what happens, rather than necessarily jumping to the bulk. So what's your takeaway from all this? Are you someone who was about to go on a bulk and is now thinking, maybe I don't need to? Is this enlightened you to how you maybe can restructure the bulk and what foods you can use and how you can do it most effectively and are going to carry on with the plan? Or have you just listened to this out of pure interest for what the hell a bulk is? Feel free to share your opinions with me on Instagram, email, the VO2 Lounge Discord server, or the VO2 Lounge WhatsApp community. For more content like this, explore my previous works, follow the show and leave a 5-star review if you like what you hear. And lastly, I would like to challenge you to share the pod with one friend today. It will really help the pod grow, and I'll thank you for it. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, it's goodbye.